All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to jump into a pretty intense piece of writing. It's a text from Pastor John L. Whitfield called Marxism, the Mind Virus of Hell. Our job here is to break down his core arguments, to really understand this unique and pretty provocative perspective exactly as he lays it out.
So right out of the gate, the author hits us with this. You can see right away, this isn't about politics or economics for him. He's framing Marxism as, well, a kind of diabolical religion. The idea here is that any promise of a utopia is just a cover for what he calls, and this is a direct quote, a gulag with better branding. So to really get what he's saying, we've got to unpack the central metaphor that runs through this whole thing.
Okay, so let's get into it. The central metaphor, the big idea that holds this whole argument together, is this concept of a mind virus. So what exactly is a mind virus according to this text? Well, the author describes it as an ideology that literally rewires souls. It does this by hooking into our pride and our resentment, and it spreads just like a disease, totally replacing, traditional logic and faith. The really wild part is how he says it works. It fools you. You think you've found this incredible new form of justice, but what you've actually done is, and I'm quoting him directly here, you've downloaded the oldest malware in history. Wow, that's a really powerful image, and it pretty much sets the tone for everything that follows.
All right, so where did this so-called virus come from? The author traces it right back to the source, Karl Marx himself. But, and this is key, this isn't a historical deep dive, it's a spiritual diagnosis. The argument isn't about Marx's academic ideas, it's about what the author sees as his demonic motivations.
And for evidence, the text points to lines like this one from some of Marx's early poetry. Now, you might read that and think, okay, maybe it's just some youthful literary angst. But that's not how the author sees it at all. For him, this is Exhibit A. It's presented as direct proof of a real satanic hatred for God, a literal declaration of war.
And that leads directly to this pretty blunt interpretation. The author's conclusion is simple. Satan found his intern. So in this view, Karl Marx isn't a philosopher. He's not just some guy wrestling with big ideas. He's framed as a willing participant, an agent for a dark spiritual force, basically handpicked to spread this destructive ideology.
So, how does a virus like this actually spread? Well, according to the text, it's all about tapping into some really basic, powerful human emotions. It starts with pride. It whispers in your ear, hey, you deserve better. Then it gives you someone to blame. It's their fault. And the final step, tear it all down. You can see the progression, right? And the author argues that this simple, powerful emotional appeal is exactly what makes it so contagious.
Okay, so we've covered the alleged origin story. Now, the author shifts gears to look at the symptoms, what this mind virus looks like out in the world today, and he has a very specific name for it.
He calls it the Church of Perpetual Victimhood. The argument here is that under this ideology, who you are as an individual gets completely replaced by which oppressed group you belong to. This leads to what the text describes as a liturgy of self-pity. It's a pretty strong phrase, right? The idea is that your social standing isn't based on what you accomplish, but on how much of a victim you can claim to be.
So why does the author think this happens? A really central part of his argument is that this virus needs a specific environment to grow. It only works, he says, when a culture has basically given up on the idea of personal sin. Think about it. If you believe evil comes from the choices people make, then the solution is personal. But if you get rid of that idea, well, you still have to explain why bad things happen. And that's when you start blaming external things, systems, classes, entire groups. You need a scapegoat.
And this quote really boils down the whole conflict into two opposing commands. On one side, you have the gospel's message, repent and be transformed. That's all about internal change. On the other side, you have Marxism's message, as the author sees it, riot and be affirmed, which is all about external revolution, fueled by getting validation for your grievances. It's presented as a fundamental choice between changing yourself or changing the world by force.
Okay, so we've got the diagnosis and the symptoms. What's the cure? The author doesn't just leave it there. He prescribes a very specific spiritual remedy, and he describes it as a kind of cultural exorcism, a full-throated return to what he calls old-school Christianity. And here's his call to action, his 3 steps for this cultural exorcism. First, preach the basics again: sin, salvation, sanctification. Second, he says, stop trying to be cool and impress a pagan culture. And third, cast out these modern idols he identifies: envy, division, and comfort. The core argument here is that the church has weakened its own immune system by, in his words, trading truth for trendiness.
And this line right here, the cross isn't cool, it's consecrated. This really sums up his whole point about the cure. From this perspective, the power of faith has absolutely nothing to do with being trendy or culturally relevant. It's about its sacredness, its ancient, unchanging truth. That's where he says the real power lies. So in the end, the author brings it all home with this one final ultimate comparison. On the one hand, you've got the serpent's promise from the Garden of Eden, you will be like God. It's all about pride. On the other hand, you have the message of the cross, you already belong to him. So you see, he's arguing that Marxism isn't really some new idea, it's just a new name for the oldest temptation in the book.
And that really gets to the heart of what this text is doing. It's not just a political critique, right? It's a complete reframing of the entire debate, and it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. When we start talking about political ideas as a form of spiritual warfare, what does that actually change about how we discuss them? What happens when the whole battlefield shifts from the political arena to the spiritual one? It's definitely something to think about.